Welcome to another video about Vadi's guards. Today I'm going to talk about Vadi's low guards. A few things to note before I do that. Vadi says actually very little about guards. When he talks about guards, introduces the guards to us at all, he gives us two lines. The first line tells us the name, the second line tells us something about that guard. One line obviously doesn't cover everything that you can possibly think about with the guards. He also doesn't generally categorize the guards the same way that I do. The low guards is actually the only category he gives us. He does talk about low guards in general a few times. I also think about middle and high guards, which I will use to describe my other videos. But Vadi doesn't do that. He just talks about low guards. Still, I think it's useful to group them up. In this video, I'm going to talk about which guards are the low guards, what they are. I'm going to give you the names because I haven't necessarily done that so far for all the guards. I'm going to talk about what you can do from them, what you can do to them, and some of the strengths and weaknesses and some kind of tips for using them that you need to be aware of. Because if you remember, guards are all waypoints for actions, not just static positions. So 4 low guards, right? Point is down in this kind of 90-degree arc that I've talked about in previous videos. On the left, we've got the boar guards. We've got Boar's Tooth and Boar on the outside. And on the right, we've got the iron door guards, iron door, middle iron door. Porta di Ferro, Mezza Porta di Ferro, Dente di Cinghiale da Foro, right? If you want to use Italian, I don't. What does he say about them, right? Again, he doesn't say very much. So, iron door, he tells us, is great for defending against cuts and thrusts. Middle iron door, he tells us, is great for delivering thrusts and delivering downward cuts. Downward cuts, specifically. Boar on the outside, he tells us it's great for attacking. Doesn't say what attacks, just attacking. Boar's Tooth, he says it's good. Doesn't say how it's good, he just says it's good. Anyone in trouble, anyone looking for trouble, I give it to them, something like that. So not the most helpful things, and some quite surprising results, right? Okay, fine, iron door for defense is quite logical. Think about this for attacks, maybe the downward strike is not the most logical strike you do from here. In general, I think when Vadi's using this one line he's using it to tell us the most surprising fact about the guard, or just wasting it in Boar's Tooth's case, rather than the most logical fact, because he's got one line, so he's using it well. And the most obvious thing, the reason why I'm saying that, the most obvious thing that all these guards charge, right, is the rising strike. False edge from the left, thrust right there, true edge from the right. Again, it's just right there, right? Just coming straight up with both of them just coming in. All of these guards also charge a very nice horizontal strike, right? No problem at all. And then the iron door guard, he talks about descending strike from them. I'm cutting arms bent because this is not a very big room, despite the wide angle camera making it look that way. That is less so of the Boar's guards. Right? The iron door guards charge the descending strike perfectly nicely. The boar guards, not so much. You kind of got to come up and down again. Note, by the way, as well as the descending strike on that side, descending strike to the other side, perfectly fine. Not so much again from the iron door guards, from the Boar's guards. You can't really do the strikes on the other two strikes on the other side. From these guards, you can't pull this. And finally, thrust. I think the thrust is probably the thing that all these guards charge the best, right? They all charge a nice thrust to either side, whichever we want. While he doesn't say it in the guard section, he does also describe, particularly Boar on the outside, entering with a thrust in another section, right? So that, the fact that both iron door and Boar's Tooth get some mention of the thrust. I think in particular the thrust, and that's for reasons I'll come back to later, is the thing that this charges the best, probably even better than the rising strike. The other general thing about using these guards, kind of positions of what both start and end points, in this case, is I find that the low guards are the most maneuverable. Why? Because I can kind of just move around, step however I want, more or less forget about the sword, and I'm going to end up in one of these guards, right? If I'm, for instance, in this guard, I've got to really think about doing it. Like if I step in weird ways and not in the guard, I've got to maybe change sword position a bit more explicitly. I'm a bit more bound up. With the low guards, I can just move around nice and comfortably. My arms are relaxed. I'm not getting tired, which is another advantage of them. Nice guards to rest in, and I can find where I want to go, move in. It works wonderfully. The other thing to think about, before I'm going to come on to some defenses from them that we need to think about, is sort of what they are as end positions, right? And the most obvious end position, apart from the sort of stepping that I was thinking, the most obvious end position for low guard that ends in a low guard are the descending strikes, right? You can go to a descending strike, you complete it, you're in a low guard. That's really important to think about when we then think about the defenses you need to do from a low guard. And this is true of using it standing, but it's also more true when you've used it, as the endpoint of a descending strike and you've missed. So what do I mean by that? Unlike other guards, right? With every guard, you're kind of closing some line of attack, right? Every other guard, you're really closing it. The low guards do, but they're closing lines of attack to the legs, which are kind of less common. And it's sort of, okay, fine, you're closing these lines of attacks, but it's not really the same way. And as a result, because my side up here is open, it changes how I need to think about my defenses. Defenses to this side, the opposite side of my sword, right, or this side if I was on the left, these are all fine, right? These are just going to be straightforward. I'm going to come to a cover, put my sword in the way, sword's coming at me, my sword's there, it's blocked it, fantastic. I can't do that when the sword's coming over my sword. Because to do that, I would have to kind of come around and out again, and it's quite awkward. You can kind of do it, Boar on the outside, you can kind of just do a quick lift the point. Okay, sometimes Boar's tooth, depending on how you're holding it exactly, right? If you're holding it kind of here, you're probably fine. If you're holding it out here, probably not. But certainly the iron door guards, sword coming over here, that's not really an option. You're just never going to get around fast enough. So there's this rising beat, it's described well in Fury. It's actually described, I think, from Boar's Tooth in Fury, but rising beat from Fury, where you come under the guard, you push it across. I'll show some videos of that while I'm talking. That is a style of defense, at least in kind of wide play, that where it comes up, that you only really see in the low guards, at least as a sort of a full percussive beat. If you don't have that in your repertoire, you have a massive hole, right? So if I'm standing like this, I basically cannot defend strikes coming in here, right? If I don't know how to do this style of rising beat. So that's something you need in your repertoire in order to use them effectively. Obviously, they are a maneuverable guard, and with every guard, you can always defend by just running the fuck away. Low guards are no different. I like doing that. If I'm doing a run away with a low guard, the rising strike to the hand at the same time is a nice way of doing that, but you're defending with your body moving away rather than with your sword. So if you can't do the rising beat, I suppose you've always got that as an option, run away. Run away and hit them better than just run away, but run away is the defensive version of it. But then, so why use the low guards, right? They've got this disadvantage from a defensive perspective. And Vadi actually does talk about some other disadvantages from them as well. Particularly, he tells us twice, once in the section on cuts, once in, they're both in the sections of cuts actually, it's just two different sections on cuts. He tells us that low guards can be broken by a heavy blow. So the descending cut coming down on the guard rather than to the person down on the guard can kind of cover the sword, and if you do that, you end up coming into a crossing where the person who's in a low guard is basically unable to break through because the leverage from being underneath the sword means that they have none, right? The descending cut comes more, has way more leverage. Vadi gives us a specific play, a set piece for this, right? He tells us your opponent's in the iron door, be an archer, and then straighten up the sword, coming to a thrust over theirs, just by stepping a little offline, technically. So we come to here, and then he tells us do the 13th, from that crossing, do the 13th play. The 13th play makes no sense from that particular crossing. It's been a headache for most Vadi people for a very long time, but there you go. The same idea though, from this, right, we're coming down, we're breaking the sword, but coming on top of it, we come into this favorable bind, and then we're doing something from the bind, whatever that something happens to be. And you've got to worry about this when you're in a low guard. But what I like about this passage is he also tells us at the same, shortly after that, it sounds like he's dissing the low guards, but shortly after that, he tells us that while they're not suited to heavy blows, they are suited to light ones, and light one can come and go as an arrow. So one of the nice features of the low guards, because your point is denied, right? So here I'm presenting my point, here I'm denying it. It's much harder for the opponent to engage on it, right? To come to this kind of coming down on top of your sword, they've got to aim for your sword rather than you. So you're not really under threat when they're doing this in terms of direct threat to you, if you can recognize it, which is also the challenge. The strength of the low guards then is that because they're charging these these light blows, and because my point's denied, it's much easier for me to just not be where my opponent wants it to be and charge a light blow coming in and coming out. Essentially disengaging, from this kind of position that they're trying to come to. And going back to something I said earlier about the guards particularly charging a thrust, I think this is most noticeable in the thrusting position. Right? If I'm thrusting from here, or if I'm holding my sword like this, what I've done is I've given my opponent where my blade is. I can see it, right? And I've given my opponent the option to find that, to essentially come to a crossing where they choose. Not so much the low guard is denied. And what's nice about the low guards is the ability to kind of come in, thrust, gain the blade, and come in all in one go, because you're denied and they're not, especially if they're coming in a point forward guard. Point up guards, right, would be the other option, which is really good for that. Even high guards, right, you can kind of choose your angle to it, kind of catch them from wherever the sword happens to be. Much harder to do that against someone in a low guard. And this point denial, again, leads to quite good entries into kind of closer or middle play, because you're choosing where you're going to come in. So that leads me to kind of conclude with sort of the bit of a summary of when to use the low guards and when not to. The main thing with low guards for me is that they're great guards. They're better guards the further away from your opponent you are. They are really maneuverable, as I said, right? They're really good at letting you choose where you're going to enter or do kind of fast, quick strikes and retreat. If you're kind of exploiting an opportunity created by your opponent unexpectedly. The closer you get to the opponent, the bigger this risk of them coming down on your sword, breaking through your guard is. They are particularly bad guards for withdrawing, right? For running away from your opponent, if you've kind of cut and you've missed, running away in a low guard, bad idea, because you're not covering anything. You always want to kind of withdraw in a guard which covers you more effectively. So that's something to watch out for them. And importantly, though, if you're going to use them, and you will naturally use them by coming to the ends of downward cuts, but if you're going to use them, you need to have this rising beat in your repertoire for when you're not able to run away, you're too close. Particularly, I find this happens where I've done a cut, my opponent has voided, and they've immediately come back in with another cut. Now I need to defend. Running away, I'm going forward, so running away is going to be too hard. That's when you need this kind of rising beat in your repertoire. Final thing on low guards, probably more than any other guards, there's this kind of annoying double feature of them. Upper body strength can make them harder to, or rather a lack of upper body strength can make them harder to use. The annoying double feature of that is that they're also great guards for resting in. So, standing like this is more tiring than standing like this, which you might need if you lack upper body strength or certainly endurance in the upper body. The reason I say that is because the defenses are much more explosive coming up, and you need to be able to come up quickly in order to be able to do it. And it is, fighting against gravity, hold my sword correctly. That makes it kind of more challenging. So that can be a factor you might need to worry about depending on your fitness levels. But in general, as I say, Vadi does talk about them, and he talks about the weaknesses of them, as he pretty quickly goes on. There are no bad guards in Vadi's system, only people using guards badly. If you are finding difficulty with low guards, you're probably too close to your opponent. Or you don't have the full repertoire of defenses you need to use them effectively. But all in all, low guards, reminder, these four They're great, right? You can do lots of strikes from them. You can do lots of defenses from them. You need to have the rising beat. You can move about in them. Best thing, enter with a thrust, choose where you're entering, and hopefully confuse your opponent using the low guards. Thanks for watching.